Okay, so in this first part of the project, we're going to set up our project file, go ahead and create our Eternity Band, do some testing. So before we get started, it's always a good idea when working with these advanced parametrics that we go in with a little bit of a plan. We know exactly what we're going to be building and what we want to change later. So the changes we want to make to our Eternity Band is going to be the ring size. And I'm going to use any size ring. Materials, we're going to want to change materials. So go ahead and choose which materials we want to set up later. I'm going to go with 14 karat, and I want yellow, pink, and white gold. Okay. We also need to know the stone size and the spacing between the stones. So it's always best, if you're using stone sizes, varying stone sizes, that we use a range of stone sizes that are going to work together. You don't want to go from like a 1 millimeter stone all the way up to a 5 millimeter stone. There's just way too many variables in there and hard to keep things nice and evenly parametric. So we're going to set a bit of a limit, but based on our plans for this design. So I know for this one we're going to do 0.05 karat stones for the smallest size and a 0.10 carat for the largest size. So we're going to go from 5 pointers to 10 pointers for our Eternity Bands. Of course, you can use different ranges. Choose what you want to be able to offer to your customers. So we'll move our notes to the side. We'll come back to those as we need them. And we'll go ahead and start building. So first thing, we're going to go to the jeweler's bench. So click on jeweler's bench if you're not already there, and we'll go to ring size builder. Okay. And I'm going to use a size 7 ring for my default size, and we're going to use the top plane at 2.5 millimeter offset. Go ahead and validate that. And we'll go ahead and start with our smallest stone. Always start with a small stone and work your way up in this design. So we'll click on stone, and we're going to use our 0.05 carat. Validate that. Okay, so for the setting, we're actually going to use a belt, using the belts tool. We need a custom shape, so we're going to draw that in the front view. That's the OXZ. Select it and click on sketch. Go ahead and zoom in on that. And our shape is actually just going to be a rectangle. And it's going to be roughly in that area. We want it leaving a gap underneath the stone so that we have a hole behind it, and roughly between here to the top of the ring size. Okay, we need to also cut an area for our seat. We're going to use a straight line and just kind of chop off that corner of the box. We'll use trim curves to do that. So click on trim curves, trim off the corner, and also trim off the little excess on either side. And then use auto connect to put it back together. Okay, let's also go ahead and add a little bit of a fillet to take care of those sharp edges. So we'll click on fillet. I'm going to use a 0.1 millimeter and highlight the curve just by hovering, and then round each corner. We just have to do the 3 outside corners. Validate that. And that's it for the sketch. Go ahead and exit. Okay. Select your stone, and we'll use, in the gemstone setting section, we'll use belts. Okay, and we just need 1 belt, so we're going to, let's go ahead and zoom in on that. We're going to go to the second tab, turn off the top belt, go to the third tab, and set up the bottom belt. So we're going to use our custom shape for the shape. We'll click on custom, use the hand to select your curve. Okay, so that'll start building our belt. Okay, we might need to make some adjustments to it, so we'll go ahead and turn off keep ratio. And actually, I got it pretty close. So depending on how you drew it, you may have to make it smaller or bigger. But you basically want it sitting like this, down below the girdle and right on top of the ring. We'll also bend it so that it matches our ring shape. So we'll go to the U bending, and it's about 1/4 of the meter here. So just about that. There we go. Okay, so you see after we bend it, it kind of spreads out the top a little bit. So we'll go back to the first tab make some slight adjustments here so that it squeezes up to that stone a little better. We don't want too much metal showing over the top of the stone, but you also don't want it underneath the girdle because we want a little protection from getting the corners of our stones bumped. So right about there, and validate that. Okay, so we went ahead and set this up on top of our ring size, but we're actually going to move it now. And to do so, let's go ahead and double click back onto our original stone and change the reference plane right here. Reference plane, instead of the ring size builder, we're going to put it back in the OXY plane. We don't want it parametrically linked to the ring anymore. You'll see why in a bit. Okay, let's go ahead and hide that curve out of the way. And the next thing we need to do is set up our curve. We're going to use a variable channel to set our stones. So if we click here on our ring size builder, go back to the solid module, we're just going to scale the ring size. So add a move, rotate, scale, switch to the scale tab, and just scale it up a bit. Make sure you click on keep original and validate. Okay, so that gives us our curve. So first thing we need to do is double click back on that curve, make sure that we set it to that 2.5 millimeters using our top plane as a guide. Validate that. The next thing we need to do is also make sure that it matches a support of some sort. If we try to run stones on it now, the stones are going to flip around. They're not going to match a ring. It's going to be, some will be flat, some will be flipped over. So to do that, we'll create a temporary solid to link it to. So select that outside curve, and using extrusion, we'll turn it into a solid shape. Now, because this is a ring size, notice that it's extruding it in the wrong direction by default. It's not based on a plane. We need to change the sweeping direction. So that is going to be the Y. If you click the little dot next to the Y, that'll reset the direction to the Y. And you see now it's going out to the side the way it's supposed to be. And we'll just turn on both sides. And then the sweeping distance doesn't matter. This is just temporary. So go ahead and validate that. And now select the curve, the outside curve, that solid shape. And down in the curve section, you're going to click on link to support. Okay. You won't see anything happen here, but when we validate it, the curve is now linked to that support. That'll keep our channel flowing around that surface correctly. So that's it for that solid. You can go ahead and delete it. We don't need it again. Okay, so take your linked curve, go to the jeweler's bench, click on variable channel. Okay, so you should see your stones are flowing properly. Okay, for the first tab, we're going to set up our minimum spacing, and that's going to be 0.6 millimeters. I kind of tested this earlier. You may have to play around with that number based on your stone sizes. We can always go back and change it as needed. And we're going to use adjustable space. In the second tab, and adjustable space is going to allow the stones to go all the way around the curve so we get that eternity. In the second tab, stone size, we're going to change the actual number of stones to a really large amount. I'm going to put 100 in there. Doesn't matter that we're over what fits, because when we change our stone ring size, we want the number of stones to adjust to fit to that ring size correctly. So we're also going to leave the size at the default. Just the 0.03 is fine, and that's because we're not going to actually use this to size our stones. We're going to change our original stone size as needed. Okay. So that's it for the channel. Go ahead and validate. We don't need to actually create a channel in the third tab. We're just setting up our positions around our ring. Okay, so now we're going to select the stone and our little bezel that we made and our positions. So control select all three, click on jeweling. Okay, so by default, jeweling is going to scale the stones to fit what was ever set in the variable channel. We don't want that. We're going to go to the third tab, turn off scaling. So turn off scale object, and we see there's our 0.6 millimeter gap. All of our bezels match together, fit together, so we have a solid band. Go ahead and validate that. Okay, then we need our prongs. We're going to go ahead and set up our prong. And I just like to type in the parameters for prongs. It's easier than trying to draw it and then change everything anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and center it first. 0, 0, 0 on the X, Y, and Z. The diameter, I'm going to use 1 millimeter prongs. And the height is going to be about 3 millimeters. We may have to adjust that once we set these. And we're going to change the mode to rounded. So there's our prong. We're going to select the prong and our variable channel. It's easier to select it from the tree instead of trying to grab that little position on the screen. So prong and variable channel. And instead of jeweling this time, we're going to use channel prongs in the prong section. That's going to set up our shared prongs. Now notice, obviously, because of the position, we set this at 0, 0, 0 on top of the plane. It's also going to set them on top of the girdle here. So we'll have to adjust that. So go ahead and validate this for now. Expand the channel prongs and then double click back on your original prong. And we need to move this down. If we move it -2.5, that's how much below we need to move it in the Z direction. Validate, recompute. See, we're getting a little closer. Now we know that there's a gap between the girdle and the table where we originally positioned that. So we might make a little bit more of adjustment. Let's try -2.3. Recompute. That's pretty close. It doesn't have to be even. We'll trim that later. Okay. And actually, I want them sticking out more than in. So we'll go back into our prong. Let's try -2.4. Okay, so that's the beauty of parametrics. Sometimes it's easier, instead of trying to calculate mathematically exactly where we're going to position it, just go ahead and set it. You can always make those little adjustments as you go. Okay, that leaves our heights just about perfect. I think they're a little short. Maybe go back in and add a little bit to the top of the prong, maybe 3.2 instead of 3. There we go. So again, make those little adjustments until it looks correct. Okay, one more step in our variable or our channel prongs. Double click back in there. We can adjust the spacing between the two prongs. Right now it's a little too close together, kind of cutting too much into our stones. So on the second tab, we're going to change the angle. The maximum angle we can go is 70 degrees. We'll just go ahead and hit 70 degrees and validate that. Okay. So looks good. Let's go ahead and save our project before we forget and we start playing around with it. Go ahead and do a save as. And we're going to call this a Eternity Ring Builder. Okay. So now we're going to do some testing. Before we do that, let's clean up our tree a little bit. I'm going to minimize everything. We can delete this Move Rotate Scale. That was the outside ring. We're done with it. We can get it out of there. The variable channel we'll leave here, but go ahead and hide it so we can find it later if we need to. The jeweling is our stones and seats. The channel prongs, our ring size builder we want. The sketch is for our curve for the bezel. The link to support you can actually delete or hide. I'm just going to delete it. Again, we're done with it. If we need it again, it's still part of the history of our other objects. So it's always good to clean up the tree, keep it simple. And save one more time, and then we'll do our testing. So I'm going to hide my ring size builder too. We don't need to see it to test it. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is test our ring size. Double click on the ring size builder, and let's change our size to, let's say, an 11. Validate, recompute. Perfect. So you can see the number of stones just adjust to the new ring size, and everything still matches the exact same. So let's go ahead and set that back to the 7 that we started with. And next we'll check the other thing that we wanted to change was our stone size and spacing. So for the stone size, we're going to go into jeweling, expand it, double click on the stone. And now let's test our largest size. We said we wanted to go up to a 0.1 carat. So we validate, recompute. Now obviously with the 1 carat, the spacing will be different. So we need to adjust the spacing as well. So go into variable channel, back to that first tab, set our minimum spacing to, I tested this ahead of time as well, that was 1.2 millimeters. Validate and recompute. And yeah, that gives us enough gap between them. Okay, so now we know our spacing for the smallest and largest sizes. We know that testing it all works. Everything looks good. So the next thing we need to do is go ahead and set that back to where it was. That's going to be 0.5 for the spacing. I'm sorry, 0.6 we said. And then change the stone size back to the 0.05 carat. Recompute, puts it back together. Okay, so one more thing, as I'm testing, we noticed that our prongs aren't quite staying at the level we want them. That's because we keep changing the stone dimensions. And our prongs are based on that same height of the stones. So it's okay though, because if I freeze our ring here and I show my ring size builder, we'll notice that we're actually inside the ring a little bit. We're going to trim that later to match our ring size. So actually, as the ring gets bigger and smaller, the height will actually vary a little bit. So it's actually works out perfectly for what we want. So that's okay. Okay, so let me show that and hide the ring size builder, and just go ahead and save this one final time. I'll see you in part 2, where we'll go ahead and set up our advanced parametrics.